Vero has updated their open water series, and yes, as the name and title implies, this is a 38mm watch and possibly the most summer looking watch of our summer series so far, with this crazy fluorescent greenish yellow color, which they refer to as swell. They also have another color which I think looks like a milky white that Vero has dubbed Cove. Both are 38mm with the stainless steel case with a blasted finish and a few updates from the 41mm series I reviewed a few years ago. The 12-hour bezels, which are new, are cerakoted. The bracelet has female end links. There are now new indices and an even cleaner dial, and the Node X clasp system on the bracelet. These fun color watches are using the SW200 movement and are currently selling for $795 straight from the Vero website. So let's jump in and check out all the new features of this Vero Open Water. As many of you are probably aware, there is a current trend towards smaller watches. And with this Vero, the original model was 41mm. Now they have produced a 38mm. So they are hopping on that trend. Now, for some, myself included, I feel this is a little on the small side. And for others, they're going to love this size. Like a lot of things, watch sizes are very subjective. Now that I have said that, let's go ahead and get all the specs here of the Open Water 38 up on screen. And I'm going to start with this awesome color before everything else. The color here is just absolutely crazy. It's bright, it's vibrant, and yes, it screams summer, probably more than any other watch I have reviewed so far in this summer series. In person, it reminds me of a fluorescent green marker, though in certain lighting it can look a little pale yellowish, but this is definitely a bright green color. If you want to stand out and be noticed, even by people who don't pay attention to watches, this is probably the watch to wear. I've had a lot of comments from people when I was wearing this watch, and pretty much most said that they loved the color, or hey, that's a cool looking color on your watch. The Open Water is available in another color, which I have not seen in person, but it does look like a milky white to me. And white watches could obviously be a cool summer watch as well, but I fell in love with this bright green. And Vero really went one step further and matched the dial color to the bezel, which was achieved by having it cerakoted, a process you don't see a lot on watches or watch bezels. Now, how will that hold up over time to scratches and marks? I'm not sure, though I do know Cerakote is used on a lot of guns, and at least on guns, it can be reapplied. The case of the Open Water is all stainless steel with a very fine media blasting, as they call it. And to my eyes, this is the same case as the 41mm, just shrunk down a bit to 38mm. Everything looks the same to my eyes, including the crab claw crown guards and the relatively flush crown to the crown guards. And the crown is still DLC coated, even though we no longer have the DLC coated bezel. But I do think with the black hands and the black numbers on the green bezel, the black crown still looks good. Unfortunately, this is a blasted case, and as you can see in this video, on certain parts of the bracelet, there are already some scratches that were put here from photography. Now, when looking at the Node X clasp, you can also see where the extension comes out, how much that link is scratched from the link and the clasp rubbing on each other. This is a watch that I really think would have benefited from one of the hard coatings so many micro brands are currently using. At the smaller size, I don't find the crown hard to use. Sure, it's a little smaller than I like, but I could still use it without issue. The bezel is a 60-click unidirectional bezel with a great bottle cap style edge, and it is very easy to grip and turn. The bezel does have a little side-to-side play, but it isn't loose, nor did I notice it getting knocked out of place. It clicks in and stays where you put it. My only gripe with this bezel is I just would have preferred the dive bezel numbers from the Open Water 41. While you can use this bezel as another time zone, I just feel with 200 meters water resistance and the overall look, I would have preferred the dive bezel. But that said, I rarely use a bezel for timing, so this 12-hour bezel may actually be more functional for me if I need to start tracking another time zone. And before we get to the dial, let's talk about what is covering that dial, which is the sapphire crystal. But what is really unique here is how I can't feel one bit of the crystal edge at all. it's a completely seamless transition from the bezel to the crystal, and the crystal itself is completely flat, which I have to say is pretty damn cool. The dial color and bezel match really well, something I know is not easy to do. And if you thought that the Open Water 41mm had a sparse dial, well, this 38mm takes it even further. The applied indices, which are outlined in black to match the hands, are now little squares. And beyond the hands, all that is on the dial is the logo and the 20 ATM at the very bottom of the dial. And yes, this is a no-date dial, and they did a date delete on the movement, so there is no phantom date wheel or a phantom crown position that does nothing. Also, there is no chapter ring either. There is a rehot, but the lack of a chapter ring and the extremely sparse dial help to keep this dial looking bigger than it is, which I think is important on smaller watches such as this. If they added a chapter ring and added a lot of unnecessary text to the dial, it would look very small. Now, Vero, I believe, assembles all their watches themselves in the USA and the movements, and in this case, the SW200 is regulated beyond the factory in 6 positions to plus or minus 5 seconds a day. The bracelet has had a few changes as well, most notably the female end links. Now, if you didn't see my review on the 41mm or you're not familiar, it had pretty large male end links that not only made the bracelet swing out instead of down, but also rubbed the link below it right out of the box. So on a brand new watch, you had this rub mark on the first link of your bracelet and it would continue to rub. That problem is resolved, and I'm glad to see they listened to all the feedback. That said, as I documented earlier, the finish is still easily scratched. I like this bracelet too, large oyster style links, but they are not fully articulated or can fold up on themselves like the 41mm could. Now that said, I don't really see that much of a difference on my wrist, as the bracelet doesn't feel stiff at all and it drapes really nicely on my 7.5 inch or 19.05 centimeter wrist. Screws are used for easy sizing, and if you want to take the bracelet off, it is a breeze as it uses quick release pins in the lugs. This new model is the first Vero to use the Nodex clasp, a proprietary clasp from the Notice watch brand. 4 brands besides Notice are currently using this clasp: Vero, Vere, Sangen, and Raven watches. Now, I've only had hands-on with the Nodex clasp once before on a Notice watch, which I believe was sometime early last year. Now, the clasp is very functional as it allows you to get that little extra length or tightness at the push of a button, and Notice is licensing this out to other brands, which is good for the brand. But like I said before, I'm not the biggest fan of how it looks when it is extended. It's a very thin piece of metal, not just a link sliding in and out, and when fully extended, there is some side-to-side play. On my wrist though, as far as comfort, I love how this watch wears. The case back is flat, the crown doesn't dig into anything, and that new bracelet with the new end links is really perfect. And for the most part, it fit my wrist out of the box, and there were 2 extra links included. As far as size, I must admit I would prefer this in the 41mm, though my wife told me it's all in my head, and this 38mm looks fine on my wrist, so there you go. Again, it's all subjective, and you like what you like. Lastly, the Lume, and I'm betting many were thinking this is probably a full Lume dial, but no, those square indices are filled up with C3 Superluminova, and the indices light up pretty good, but I would have liked to have seen more Lume on the hands themselves, and I'm not sure why the back end of the second hand is lumed instead of the tip. I do like this update to the Open Water series. Vero could have just made some fun colors in a smaller case, but they didn't stop there. They changed the bezel, both in function and in material. They fixed the end link problem, and they added the new clasp system. Now, $800 isn't cheap, and like with any watch brand, competition is fierce, but Vero has always marched to the beat of a different drum, and this 38mm Open Water follows suit, and that is what I like. They're not afraid of being different or standing out, even if it means they won't be on the wrist of every watch enthusiast. My only real issue, at least on this example, is how easy the blasted finish can be scratched. I will have a written review with lots of photos, and you can see even more at Vero's website. Both links will be in the description. Of course, I want to hear from you, so let me know what you think of this new Vero Open Water 38mm. This is Don Evans from Watch Report. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.